Okay, let's continue our discussion of adjustment layers. We're going to look at a couple more adjustment layers. First off, let's look at how you can just adjust just simply the overall brightness or contrast of a layer. So I've got the backpack image, which should be your top image. Let's just focus on that image for now. It's the top image, so we don't necessarily have to turn off all the other layers because we won't get confused if it's on top. But let's go ahead and look at it, and it's actually pretty well exposed as far as exposure goes, but let's go ahead and take a look at our options anyway. If we click on the adjustment layer, we have two different possibilities here that we can mess with. One of those is brightness and contrast, and the other is exposure. Let's just take a look at exposure for a moment. I'm going to go ahead and clip this one in just so I don't forget to. Plus, I'm on the very top layer, so everything's going to be overtaken if I don't. Up here, we have exposure, offset, and gamma correction. So if a picture is overexposed, that's like, say, when you use a flash and you don't need one, and it ends up super bright like that. That's overexposed. Or we can underexpose, which you end up with like a lot of gray to the image. So if your image is, supposed to be lit up and it didn't light up enough, you could use an exposure. If you light it up and it's kind of like, whoa, that messed up a little bit, then there's this gamma correction, which then sort of does the opposite. It sort of puts it the other direction to try to fix something that got messed up in the overexposures. You can see here there's a lot of different things we can do. I'll turn that off. So there's the original image, and then there's this one, and it's overexposed now. But just so you can kind of see the difference, okay? Now I'm going to delete this one, and we'll try it with one of the other options. So another one that we have is just the plain old brightness and contrast. Brightness, of course, has to do with lightening the picture or darkening the picture. Contrast has to do with making the darks darker or the lights lighter. So what you should be thinking in your head right now as I talk about these is, wait, isn't that kind of what levels does? Yeah, and mostly I use levels and don't use these tools just because levels for the most part gets what I want. But I will say I do like the brightness contrast a little bit better than exposure. So you can see here, there's before, it's just a little bit gray. And then after, I've brightened it just a tad, but I've increased the contrast so that that difference between the light and the dark is spread out. Darks are darker, lights are lighter. And so that just increases that contrast and makes the picture a little better to see. Okay, there is another one in here. I'll show it to you, but it's one of those that I'm just not going to spend a lot of time with in this class. There's lots of YouTube tutorials out there, and you can go and learn a lot about them. It just seems to be one that confuses students a lot. And it's called curves. Curves is very powerful. It's like a lot of these things all built into one, and there's a ton of buttons, which is, I think, what confuses people. But you can adjust based on the channels, and you can pull this line up and down, and it changes your picture. You can even make an S-curve and do some really weird, funky stuff to it. Okay? Again, I'm not getting into curves. I'll let you, if you really are interested, go and read some more about curves. But you can see I kind of have that same image look that I had that first time just by messing around with this. There are presets in here too. So like you can have strong contrast and then it's automatically in there. So these kind of remind me of like filters. You can kind of pop into here and try the presets. And then it just changes those curves for you. So I'm not going to ask you questions about curves, but I will allow you to investigate that one on your own if you want. Just to understand that brightness and contrast is the easiest way to just adjust the brightness, the overall brightness, or the contrast of your image. And remember that contrast is that difference between darks and lights. All right, that's that one. Let's look at how to tint to shades of one color. Let's say that we want the focal point of this picture to be this mug. And the rest of the picture, we want to have it tinted to be some shade, maybe a green shade, since there's green on this mug, a really pale green, let's say. So what we need to do is basically select everything but the mug. And as you know, that's probably easier done the other direction. Select the mug instead of everything else. Again, make sure you're on the layer because I wasn't. And we will select the mug. I may need to touch this up on a layer mask. Oops. Because I feel like it's not going to be friendly with me. This might be a better magnetic lasso kind of picture. Because I didn't want you to have a huge file to deal with, I made these pictures smaller, and so the resolution is not the greatest. so kind of hard to grab a hold of. Anyway, let's put this on plus. We'll go around the edges here. Oops, I'm really wanting to jump around on me here. Click, click, click. There's just such a edge there. Anyway, like I said, we would touch this up on the layer mask. I'm not going to make you just watch me sit here and struggle with my magnetic lasso right now, although you're probably entertained by it. I know that's probably exciting sometimes to just see me get mad. Okay, there. Good enough, let's say. I'll fix it up on the layer mask. Okay, so we've got the mug selected, but we need the opposite selected. So I'm going to right click and select the inverse. And so now everything but the mug is technically selected. So now we're going to add, and we're going to change the color of the background. So guess what? We're actually going to hue saturation again. Like, we keep living in hue saturation land. So we're going to click here for hue saturation, but this time, instead of shifting everything like so, and of course I do need to clipping mask this in, instead of shifting everything like so, which is kind of a little weird, we're going to hit the Colorize button down here at the bottom. Okay, now on Colorize, I can get to, let's see, there's my shades of green, and then I can increase that saturation to make it like greener green, or I could even darken the rest of the picture so that the mug is standing out even more. Now, I'm not going to touch up the mask right now, but you got to get the gist of it here, right? And of course, I feel like this is still kind of gray, so I'm going to come back into my picture, and then I'm going to take my quick selection and grab the middle of this phone. And then I'm going to go back into our brightness and contrast, or I could do exposure, and I'm going to unbrighten that. See that? We're pulling that down. There. Now it's darker. Here's before, see, with the little speckles on there, and after. How about that? That's a lot better. All right. I've got my overall brightness contrast. I need to clipping mask that in. We have a lot of things clipping to this one. So we've got the brightness contrast, hue saturation, and then we're darkening that phone. All right. Continue on and practice with that if you are in Photoshop. I'll pop over to Photop here just so you can see the process, but I'm sure you figured it out. So I'm on my backpack image. I'm going to select my coffee cup. Wonder if we can use our object selection this time. I always love to try going to that. Oh, nope, awful. So we'll try to magnetic around this one a little bit. Again, I'm not going to worry about making this perfect at all. I would touch it up on the mask. And for the sake of time, we're not going to worry about it right now. All right, so I've got my selection, but we want to make the other part of the picture be the green color. So I'm going to right click and invert. So now the other part is what's selected instead of the coffee mug. And then, as I said before, we're going to go in here to our hue saturation and click Colorize. And it's Colorize in both images. Remember, we need to clipping mask this in, so it doesn't do it to the whole thing. And then same thing, we're just going to modify the hue until we get to the hue that we want. And then pull that saturation so that you have, I couldn't see mine because the saturation slider is different in Photop than it is in Photoshop. Photoshop zeroes all the way here. Photop, it's in the middle, so I had to go up on my saturation to find it. All right, there we go. And then we Control D to get rid of our marching ants. Oops, I hate when that happens. Let's click back on here, Control D to get rid of the marching ants. All right, and then the additional items that we did, we chose this middle part. I'll grab my magic wand. Oh, magic wand tolerance is too low here, and it's not grabbing all of it, so let's turn that up. Control D and try again. There we go, that's better. Remember this one here. I did a brightness contrast. You could even do a levels. I mean, honestly, you can do exposure, you know, you can do lots of different things to any of these. So there's my exposure turned down on that one. Let me clip it in. So it's just doing it to the phone. See, turn it down. Great. And then what we else did? We had a brightness or something overall, right? So I'll brighten this up just a little bit. Clip it in. Boy, Photop, it gets kind of mad if you don't clip it in. All right, we'll brighten that up and add some contrast. There we go. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't Control D, so I was probably brightening up and adding contrast to everything. So let me delete that mask and add a new one. There we go. All right, there we go. Brightness. A little more contrast. Maybe too much brightness and contrast. All right, there we go. Basically, that's the general gist of it. Let me get this out of the way so we can see. So here's what we should have as our basically our finished image here. We have one more thing I'm going to show you that's kind of cool, but you should be pretty proud of yourself. Look at all these different things that we've done. We've really modified all these pictures and done a lot of different things with the colors using a ton of adjustment layers. We have adjustment layers everywhere. But let's look at our one last thing. You're probably wondering, why is this gal still down here? Oh, because we're going to do the fun thing with her. So find her wherever she's at. Our Red Lips Pexels copy one. Let's find her, and we're going to add what's called a threshold adjustment. I'm not even going to tell you what it is yet because I want you to just be excited by it whenever you click it. Threshold adjustment. Uh-oh, everything went nuts. Be sure to clipping mask. All right, there you go. This gives you that sort of pop art effect that you've seen on lots of different things. There we go. Yeah, how about that? Isn't that kind of neat? Now, if there are areas that you don't want, let's say there's like, what's it called? Confetti on her nose here, then I would want to, not on the threshold layer, but on the actual picture layer, I would want to paint that out, right? So I would add a layer mask on this layer, paint in black, and kind of get rid, I know you're going to be like, wait a minute, that's going to mess up the whole nose. Well, yeah, but not either. There, see, now it's gone. So you could do it while you have this on. So if there were other little places where there's like spots or confetti or something that I don't need to be there, I can kind of get rid of those spots in here on this other view, however you wanted to. And yeah, so it looks really weird on here, but in the threshold view, I don't need those parts. Okay, so that's threshold. Isn't that neat? I think that's pretty cool. Let's look at in Photoshop, same situation. Let's isolate that gal. Red Lips Pexels copy. Find her. We're going to choose the adjustment layer called threshold. Clip it in so that it's only doing her layer. And then make your adjustments as you see fit. Again, pulling back. And then if there's areas that are just not looking so hot, add a layer mask to the girl, not to the threshold, and paint in black on that layer mask on those areas that need to go away. Again, it's going to look kind of funny on this particular disabled one, but it actually looks right on here. So there you go. So that's the threshold adjustment layer. And this is what this should look like whenever all is said and done. So you have a project coming up that you're going to be turning in for me, but if there's any that you haven't filled out your note sheet for, be sure to take a look back, make sure you know what adjustment layers to use for what effects, and let's get ready to do a fun project with adjustments.